Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today on Masechtas Horiot daf Dalid. We're going to begin on the bottom of Gimel Medbeis, 2 lines from the bottom. So we were learning that when a Beis Din makes an erroneous psak in which the punishment would be in a case of a mazid, that you would be chayv kares, and b'shogig you have to bring a carbon chatos. So in the situation where the majority of Klal Yisrael follow their psak, then there's a chiyuv of a par helm davar shel tzibor. Now, let's say a yachid who follows along, so it's dependent if it's that he's totally al das Beis Din, or he does it by himself. If he does it by himself, he has to bring his own carbon. However, if he does it based on the Beis Din, so then our Mishnah said he's going to be potter. Now, this Gemara says, Tanya Rameir Mechayiv. Rameir says, and Rashi helps us out here a little bit, the Tol Ba'atzmahavi, in the event where you did the Avera by yourself, in other words, you didn't do it because of what the Beis Din said, then in that situation, you're going to be chayav to bring a carbon chata. So Shimon Poiter. However, Shimon says, no, you're total Beis Din. Okay, Rabbi Lezer Omer Suffolk. So this L'chayra is going back on our case, that our Mishnah said that you Beis Din paskind, and it was understood that they made a mistake, and then they retracted. So in that situation, if the individual does the Avera, and he did it, even though, let's say, he wasn't aware that they retracted, so the question is that Tolbas das Atzmo, or is it Tolbas Beis Din? So our Mishnah said that Reb Shimon is Poiter, which we see over here, and according to Rabbi Lezer, Omer Suffolk. So he says that you're chayav to bring a Asham Tolui because we don't know which one it is. Mishum Simchas Omer Tolui. Simchas says he's hanging, which is an interesting thing. It sounds almost like a suffix. So Rabbi Yochanan and Asham Tolui Kibanayu. The question is, do you have to bring an Asham Tolui? The difference between Rabbi Lezer and Simchas holds you did not bring an Asham Tolui, and of course, he, according to Rabbi Lezer, he does require it. Says Rashi, he says, imagine you have in front of you a piece of fat. You don't know what is it. Is it kosher or non-kosher fat? And you ate it. But dinhu, so it's a suffix. Demevi asham toli. You would think Taki you should have to bring a kosher toli because maybe you're eating non-kosher fat. The havi bar chiyuv malia, and then you be chayiv to bring a carbon chatas on that. So avol hacha leikol meimar shema toyel ba'atzmo mamishu. In this case, you don't have to say, well, it's comparable, and therefore you should have to bring the carbon on asham toli because maybe you're relying on the Beis Din because you didn't know that they retracted, or maybe you still, because they did retract, it's based on you. Shari al pi hayra huaisa. Again, you really did based on their actions. So it really is leaning more toward that it was told das Beis Din. Hilkeinu maybe asham toli. And therefore, because of that, it's not really almost like a 50-50 suffix. So a suffix sounds more like mamish, like is it chayil, is it shuman? And Rabbi Lezer holds that in this case it's also something in that you would have to bring an asham tolui. Sumcha says no, it's just tolui. We just don't know because it's not for sure. You don't bring a carbon. Okay. To what can we compare Rabbi Lezer's thought process of this doubt? Well, Adam shachol savik chayil savik shuman, as we saw in Rashi. V'noidoloi shemevi asham. And it became known to him, says Rashi, Hachinami ikol meimer shema toyel ba'atzmo mamashu. Right? So he would bring a carb. He would bring an asham toli. According to the shita that says that the tzibor brings the carbon par, but not the Beis Din, farsama milsa, that would have changed the psak, right? The word would have gotten out that the psak was changed, right? Because all of a sudden why is everyone bringing a parim dav shel sibur? What's going on? Oh, because the basin made a mistake, everything, right? El filmani mer basin meviin dolom afarsim milsa. People are not going to find out about it. So therefore, maybe it's still todas basin. Ihavi shoyel havi amrinle. He could have asked a question, and therefore, because of that, on some level, it leans also toward him relying on himself. Rav Yosi bar Oven Vitem Rav Yosi bar Zvida Mashal the Sumchas, who says that it's just a lashon of toloi lo hadavadaim lo adam shemevi kaparasai bein hashmashais, a person who brings his carbon during this twilight time. So during this bein hashmashas, some b'yoyim nischaper loy, some b'shachashecha nischaper lo, shein maybe ashim toloi. So in this situation, we don't know, like, was it nighttime or was it daytime? So you have to obviously bring the carbon in the proper time. If it was done at night, says Rashi, lo havi kapar malya. It's supposed to be brought during the day. So you don't know what was it day or was it night. However, in that situation, you would not bring a carbon. You wouldn't have to bring another carbon in that situation. Says Rashi, as it says in Talmud Nishchat, the Asi Aseh the Pesach, v'Aseh the Echilos Kachim, v'Dochi Aseh the Shlomim. Okay. Then it brings down the Shita that Ben Ishmash's head of Ayin. It happens quickly. Hachanami Leiko Memer Shema Mamish Tayu Ba'atzmo Shaikvar Horo Bastin. So again, since Bastin already paskined, so you can't say it was really based on yourself, because you're really only doing it because the Bastin told you that it was okay. There's no question in a situation where the Bastin does it that you're not going to know about it at all. And therefore, you would think, since you should know about it, therefore it's really al das atzmo, and therefore you shouldn't. It's almost like not a suffix that maybe it was definitely on you. The Haviyamrinale the hacha b'suffix miboy yom sahum mishchashecha ish shoyel lo ashkach inish the mishayle. If you would go around and ask people this question, they're not going to really answer that question, right? Because Ben Ishmashis is a suffix. It's unknown. It's uncertain to you. So therefore, in that situation, you're going to be potter because you couldn't ask the question. So this is the idea according to Sumchas. If it's Tayla, then if you're Tayla b'beis, then you're potter. But if you're Tayla on yourself, you're chayiv. So Rabbi Kiva says, while you're preparing to leave, you're at Tarid, so you still think Psak Beistin is correct, even though they changed it. So you're Tayla b'beistin. Okay, that's what we're going to see in a second. So Amrulai. So Shabrakam Rabbi Kiva ben Azai. So what exactly is being said over here? So as we said, Rabbi Kiva says, again, in this case where we don't know this guy did it, he didn't hear the Bastin. So the question is, if it is bebeso, or maybe you could have found out about it and you didn't, so therefore it's like you're told b'atzmo, that's where you're chayiv. However, if you went to another country, there's no way you could have found out about it. So Rabbi Kiva said, I agree, shehu karvel liftor min a. In that situation, it sounds more logical than that you're going to be potter. One more time, it's more karv liftor, because it sounds like you really were relying on the Bastin. So Armulo ben Azai Maishna Zem in a Yosha Beveso. Understand why is it different if you're sitting in your house that you should have been responsible to know? So maybe also you're responsible to know in general. Just this Yosha Beveso Efsher Haya Shiyishma. When it comes to, again, when sitting in your house and you're in the same city, you could have found out the Bastin was Chayzer. Mashain Kain, when it comes to going Medina Siyam, Lo Haya Lo Efsher Lishmai. So on this, Gemara says there's a pretty logical exchange over here. Shabra Karmelei Rabbi Kiva ben Azai. So Marava Hichsik B'derech Ikbenai. The truth is, we're talking about a situation where he's already preparing on his trip. He's on the way, as I already said. Leben Azai Chayev Daha Bebese. So the fact that he says, since he's still in his house, he, even though he's getting his passport and his plane tickets ready, but he's still there. So therefore, he still could have found out. The fact that he didn't, there was tov atzmai. Rabbi Kiva potter deha hichzik b'derech. So again, according to Rabbi Kiva, even though you're still there, because you're preparing to leave, you're so torrid that you're still thinking the basin psak is correct. Harla basin l'akares kol haguf. So if they say that there's no Shabbos, there's no Nida, there's no din of Avodah Zarah, so in that situation, we don't listen to them, obviously. But even if you did listen to them, there'd be no carbon parham davar shel tzibur, because it's something which is not a part of a mitzvah, but the entirety of a mitzvah. And this is how we see in the Psukim, according to numerous interpretations. Talk about a Venelam Davar, it says Venelam Davar. And since it says Venelam Davar, here, let's find this. So Venelam Davar, Bo Lamed de Betoil Mixas Bekim Mitzvah Chayev. Right? V'loy Shiakar Mitzvah Kula. So it says that a matter became forgotten, not the whole thing. So Ketzad, what does that mean? So Amr, Ein Nida B'Tayra, Ein Shabbos B'Tayra, Ein V'Skachav B'Tayra, Yochei Yechavim B'Chayim, Talmud Benam Davar V'lo Shedis Ale Mitzvah Kula. Hari Elu Paturin, therefore you're Pater. Aval Amru, Yesh Nida B'Tayra. Now there's definitely a law of Nida in the Torah. Aval Habol Shemeshem Kan Yayim Pater. So the mistake is within the, if you will, the finite, the nuance of halacha. So that's where then there would be this mitzvah would take place, if you will. Fine. Yesh Shabbos b'Tayra, and therefore you'd be potter. Knows the yachid would be potter because you're really being told by basin. Yesh Shabbos b'Tayra, v'hamaitim rishus yachid rishus haram and potter. So yeah, you're not allowed to do the lavates malachos, but hotzah, there's no issue of taking an item from your house to the street. So bowing down is allowed. So this is lo kol haguf, and therefore that's the reason why you be chayiv by listening to the erroneous psak of beis din. There will be a chayiv parham davar shel tzibur. Omar. So now we analyze this better. Yochli paturin, you would think that you would be potter, and you'd only be chayiv with part. V'i bekim mixas or bittul mixas paturin. If, let's say, if your potter, when it comes to even when he gave a part, the nuance, v'kiris kol go paturin b'may v'kiris kol go paturin. So b'may chayavin, you'd always be potter, right? So it's either the whole thing or none of it. You're saying that if all of it and none of it, or part of it, there's no chiyuv. So then there's no din chiyuv ever. So obviously it's got to be mixas. So tani hachi kakashu. This is the question. Ema davar kula milsa. Maybe when it says davar, it's referring to the whole matter, the whole mitzvah. Maybe only when you do when you mess up the whole mitzvah, you say, oh, there's no avodah zarah. That's when the concept applies. Talmud lomar v'nelam davar. So my mashma, how do we derive from here? So the mem sofi v'nelam, we say omer ula karibe v'nelam instead, and the fact that it says meh, so we write meh davar. So that final mem could almost be attached to the next word. And therefore it's mid davar from the matter, so you put the mem to the next word, and therefore it shows only some. Chizki omer krav yasu achas mikol mitzvahs. Mikol mitzvahs v'loy kol mitzvahs. So it says mikoil. Okay. Mitzvos, tarti mashmas, mashma 2, not 1. Rav Nachman Yitzchak, mitzvos ksiv, which is 1. Rav Ashi omer yolf davar mizakin mamre. So let out exer shav. The ksiv be mizakin mamre kivul mimcha davar hu yosim in the davar asher gedol chayim and smile. That you're not allowed to deviate either way, right or the left. So ma mamre min hadavar v'loy kol davar. When it comes to the din of zakin mamra, we just take for granted that's the din, that it has to be that, again, it's nuanced that they disagree with the Sanhedrin. It can't be that they disagree with mamish, an entire mitzvah. So abba hayra davar v'lo kol gof. Okay. Am Rabbi Yehuda Mishmol. Ein beis chayavin ad shiur b'davar she'en hatzedukim moedin boy. Abba b'davar she'hatzedukim moedin boy paturin. So it has to be something that the tzedukim, the Sadducees, only believe in Torah shebechsav. So in other words, anything which is written down, which is beferish, that you can just read it. My time is where it says Zilkar Ravu. You can just go straight into the psukim and read what the mitzvah is, right? It says explicitly black and white, so obviously you know what the mitzvah is. So if the Beis Din gives an erroneous psak on something which you can just look up beferish in a pasuk, so that doesn't count. And therefore, if people would violate it based on something in which the Sadukim are moedim boy, so then you're not going to have to bring a party on the Mashal Sibor. It's only on things that they don't believe, which is the nuance, the medrash, the Torah Shemal Peh. So in that situation, that's where there's the potential that the Beis Din makes a mistake, that you follow it, that a carbon will be required. Tanan. Yesh nida b'Torah avol habal shemer shem keneged yoyim potter. V'mai shemer shem keneged yoyim haksiv. There's a pasuk. What do you mean? That's something which the Sadukim agree with. That there's a concept that a woman has to count continuously when it comes to the dinim of becoming a nida, or counting if she's a zava. Ksiv b'safra law, she counts malamid sheseferes echad le'echad. She counts one day to the next. So what do you mean? This is something which the Tzadikim are moida. So the Amri Hara Sharia. What the mistake was, that when it came to the dinim of Nida, they said that Hara, which is really Tchilas Bia, so that initial act, and there's a machlok is exactly what is Hara, so that initial act is allowed. And that's not found anywhere in the Psukim. So therefore that would be the case. So Gamar Bia Hu Asira, only the completion of Bia, but not the Hara, not Tchilas Bia. If he uncovers her source, which is even Hara, the pasuk's mashma. Diamri Kedarka Asira, right? So it's not Hara. Kedarka Asira, Shalo Kedarka Sharia. The Bia Shal Kedarka is allowed. Haksiv Mishka V'isha, right? Mishka V'isha is talking about not just Kedarka, but even Bia Shalo Kedarka. So it's also in the pasuk. The Amri Kedarka Aser Fil Hara. B'Shaloi Kedarka Gamar Bia Huda Aser Avol Hara Sharia. We're saying that Bia Kedarka, even Tchilas Bia is Aser with Nida. However, it's Bia Shal Kedarka, the Isser is only with Gamar. Bia B'Hara is allowed, which of course is also not true. And there's no pasuk that says that Bia Shalo Kedarka, the din is that when it comes to Hara, it's Aser. Yachafil not Nidanami. So why are we telling us the case of Shemer Shayim Keneged Yoyim? Just say straight out, we're talking about a case of a Nida. So why do you have to come on to this case of Shemer Shayim Keneged Yoyim? So that's the question. So let's just make sure we have if we see Rashi over here. Let's see. Okay. El Oilam Kedarka, says Rashi. Real, we're talking about that it's Bia Kedarka. The Amri B'Shemer Shayim Hayra Sharia Afil B'Kedarka. We're saying that when it comes to Shemer Shayim Keneged Yoyim, the Tchilas Bia is allowed, even if it's Bia Kedarka. The Gamar Bia Hud Aser. The Ka'amri, it says Rashi, it says in the pasuk, the Amri Hara B'Isha Nidahu, the Chsev V'Loi B'Shemer Shayim, Hilkach Lo Mesukma B'Nida El B'Shemer Shayim, the Havidavar Shein Hatzadukim Moedim Ba. Let's go into the Gemara. So, Avi Amri Hara B'Isha Dava Hu D'Chsiva. So this pasuk is by Nida. It's not by case of Shemer Shem Keneged Yoyim, so Sadukim don't believe by this. So in other words, we're really talking about Bia Kedarka with Hara, Tchilas Bia, and by Nida, it is written Beferish. However, when it comes to Shemer Shem Keneged Yoyim, it's not, and therefore that's not something that Sadukim agree with. Therefore, that's the place where the erroneous psak would fall, something like that. The boy say, the army Zava Lo Havia Ela B'Yomi. Now, when it comes to a Zav, you can only become a Zav when you see this flow during the day. And Tanan, and that's it. Now, of course, we know that a person could become a Zava also at night, but that's only through a Medrash Chachamim, the Hudrasha, and therefore that would be a second answer. Right? So Rashi says, "Avahecha dichaz b'layla tahira v'huda b'shemer shayim hilka chol b'sukma b'nida el b'shemer shayim." Okay, fine. Tanan yesh Shabbos b'tayra. Avol, there is a din of Shabbos. Avol hamayt rishus yachid rishus potter b'yamai haitzah ksiva. The pasuk says lo satziu Masim Evatechem. You're not allowed to leave and remove any loads from your house, as it says in Yirmiyah. You can't take loads out of your house. You can't do malacha, etc. Okay, so we already have a pasuk that there's an Isser Hotzah. So the Amri Hotzah hu de Aser Hachnasa Mutter. The holy pasuk talks about hachna of Hotzah, taking something out from your Hayachid into a Shusarabim. But Hachnasa, the other way around, it doesn't say. So maybe their mistake was by Hachnasa. Okay. The E-boy saying the Amri Hotzah, it's Hotzah, the Hachnasa hu de Asiri. Moishid v'zayrik shari, but maybe handing an item to another or throwing something in the Rosh Hashanah, maybe you would think that that's mutter. Now that is not found in the Psukim. It's not. Yeshav is chachavim b'tayra v'hamishtachav b'pater. V'aymer hamishtachav v'amai hamishtachav v'ksiva. The pasuk says you don't have to bow down to idols. The chsiv you're not to worship idols. So what do you mean? That's something to be fair in the pasuk. Diamar kiyasiri hamishtachav v'kadarka. You're only not to bow down to an idol, which is the normal way to bow down. That's the proper way of worshiping that idol. But to bow down to an idol in which that is not the way it's normally done, for example, Baal Peor, or the Markolis, which is brought down beside this Vodazar at great length, which we saw not too long ago. So maybe it's allowed. Of course, it's not. It's only when you bow down your body, your hands, feet, and everything. But when you bow down without prostrating yourself entirely, maybe that's allowed. So that's not found in the Torah. Okay, so that's the second answer. All right, let's see a couple of questions here. Question 8. Amru yesh Shabbos b'Torah, avol hamoitz versus hayachar just rabin pater. Hatzadukim maidim b'hoitzik siv. So one is hachnasa. Or talking about Moshe V'Zerik. Okay, that's basically it for that. TA1. Unfortunately, I got this wrong completely. Elu Shnei Sugi Horois Shahor Beis Mishageg B'Davar Shizdanu Kares B'Shkagasu Chatas Kavua Mikol Makam Patur and Mekarman. So it's Hayrul Akaris Kolgov. That's unfortunate. Probably knew that. The very first omen, I just couldn't understand probably what they were asking, but that is what that's what they're looking for. Which is the exact same question as TB3. I wrote because I already probably knew this question from before. Im akar kol atayra v'lokayim mixes mavata mixes im zel davar shasudik and moedim boy dahainu davar met atayra havil tenachash beis rabin yoyden azeh. Okay, so that's called doing tshuva, right? So that's TB 3. TB3. Okay, good. So I got it right the second time. Okay, and that's all they ask. Of course, next test they could ask about the Avodah Zarah. Maybe they'll ask about Shabbos again. That would be a nice bonus. Maybe they're going to talk about Nida. Less likely. But Avodah Zarah, that's a question that I'm surprised they haven't asked yet, because there's 2 solid answers, but has not happened. Okay, let's continue on Daled Omid Beis, and let's see what the next question is. Boy Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef poses the following question. If the basin says in Charisha b'Shabbos, there's no din plowing on Shabbos. Now, of course, that's one of the Lamates Malachos, right? So, says Rashi, it's not a question, but davar she'in hatzudikim moedin klal el b'bitl mixas v'kim mixas kamaboyle. The question is like splitting that he admits to something. Mi amrinan kivan dekam moedi b'kulhu milsa. The fact that he's in general agreeing to all the laws of Shabbos, kibitl mixas v'kim mixas dami. So the fact that he says there's no din charisha, but that's only part of a large mitzvah of Kiyum Shabbos. There's 39 malachos, so basically just one of the 39. Is that considered to be bittul mitzvahs or Kiyum mitzvahs? Right? You're like plowing up the charisha, right? You're ripping it up. So it's an interesting question. So within Shabbos, which is so many laws, if you take one of the Lamites Malachos and say this of the 39 Malachos doesn't apply, is that considered to be Oiker Kol Guf or not? So Tashma Yesh Nida B'Torah Revel Habal Shemer Shem Keneged Yoim Potter. Yamai, why would you be Potter in that case? Ha Akron Shemer Shem Keneged Yoim Kolikr. You're completely removing the entire concept of Shemer Shem Keneged Yoim. So Mechav Yosef Shemer Shem Ka'amrit Kiddeshani Non. So you said no. It's like we said before. That's not Akiras Kol Guf, the Shemer Shem, because we're talking about a particular situation, as we said, where we're talking about Bia Bahara, Kedarka, and by Shemer Shem Keneged Yoim, it's not written anything about that. Okay. And we're going to ask the exact same questions and same answers now. So let's just get through that. Tashma Yeshav was material. Hamaitz Mishas Yochel Rishas Rambam Potter. Vamai Ha'ikr in the Heitzah Kalikr. You're removing one of the Lamites Malachos. This is probably the best of the questions because it's also one of the Lamites Malachos, just like Harisha. No Hasam Nami Kiddush Ninan. It's like we said before that he said no, there is a din of Hotzah. It's not like there's no din of Charish at all. You're saying that there is a din of Hotzah, but there's no din Hachnasa, there's no din Haishid Zaydik. Tashma. Yeshav is Chachavim Batayra of Hamishtach Vapantim Amai Bahoy Queen and Wishtach Vakolekar. So Amri Haishtach Vanami Kedashninan, it's the same thing we said before, which means either we're talking about, you're allowed to you can bow down to an idol if it's not the normal way to bow down to it, like if it's Marcolius or it's Balpur. Or they would say, bowing down is only if it's Pishud Yadayim Raglayim. Boy, so that doesn't answer the question. Boy, Rav Zera, I guess that's the boy the Lifshita. So Rav Zera poses another question. In Shabbos b'Shmitois, Mahu. So there's no Shemitah by, there's no Shabbos by the Shemitah year. Okay. What exactly does that mean? So, but my Tal, what exactly is the mistake over here? Bahadain Kra, by this pasuk, it says B'chadish v'katzer tishbois, that you're supposed to rest from plowing or harvesting fields. Mizman de'ika charisha ika Shabbos. So the time when there's the din of plowing, there's a din of resting. Mizman de'leika charisha, the time when there's no plowing, such as the Shemitah year, leika Shabbos. There's no Shabbos. So it says Rashi, the mashma is man de'ika charisha, the other years, Tishbois, Ika Shabbos. So maybe it makes sense during the time which you work the land, so there's a din of resting. However, in a time when you're not allowed to work the land, so maybe there's no Shabbos at all. So since he does say that all the other days, all the other years, there's a chiyuv of Shabbos, because again you're working, so therefore you need to rest. So kibitl mixes v'kim mixes dami odilma kivan deka akrin le b'shvius kiakiris haguf dami. Maybe you're uprooting the entire thing because you're basically saying the entire law of Shabbos doesn't apply on the Shemitah. So Ravina Tashma, and here we go through different answers. Navi shinis nava. So let's say you have a prophet who provides prophecy. And Rashi says, Navi Shalemis. He actually was a true, proper prophet. Navi Hasheker. And then he ended up becoming a false Navi. And he gave this testimony to Akar Dover Medivri Torah. And he wanted to be Oiker, something from the Torah itself. So in this situation, the din is he is going to be Chayiv, the punishment of Chenek. What Bittel makes us, Lakim makes us, let's say that this Navi Sheker says that he's causing you to not do certain mitzvahs or part of it. So Rav Shimon Omer Potter, Rav Shimon says in general, when it comes to shar mitzvahs, you're Potter. And so do the Rabbanan say that. Now, let's say they say that you can do some forms of idol worship. Even though you're saying today you could do it, but tomorrow you can't, which means it's like Baitel Mixas, Kiyam Mixas. So Chayev, Shomamina in Shabbos V'Shias, Kibitl Mixas V'Kiyam Mixas Dami Shemamino. We say like it's like saying to do Avodah Zarah, but not tomorrow, right? So it's the same thing as when it comes to keeping Shabbos. You're not keeping Shabbos today, but not tomorrow. So therefore, we say that is also considered to be a form of bittul mixus, v'kim mixus, and therefore, based on that psak, in fact, you would the din would be that you would bring a par harlem davar shel tzibur. Says the next mishnah. Says Masdisen har based in. So let's say the based in made a mistake in the psak. V'yada echad mehem shito, and as we saw before, one of the members of the Beis Din recognized that there was a mistake. Ve'omer lehen, he says, quote, "Tu'unin atem, you're making a mistake." Oh, shlo haya mufla shel Beis Din sham. Let's say someone who is not the leader of the Beis Din was there. Oh, shahay echad mehem ger. One of the members of the Beis Din was a convert, or mamzer, or nisin, or zaken, an elderly person, shlo royal avanim, and he was not fit to be able to have children. Harzeh potter. In all these cases, you would be potter. There'd be no chiyuv. It needs to be that everyone has to be chay, it's like an all or nothing type of deal, and therefore, as we saw before, it's got to be ad shiur kulon. So shnemer, as the pasuk says, kan eda v'nemer holon eda. Ma eda hamur laholon kulon roy lahoram. Av eda hamur kan ad shiur kulon roy lahora. All of them have to be fit to be moira hara, and all these things are issues as to why they can't. And on this, Rashi asked a very important question by someone who's an older dude who can't have kids, right? So let's say he's just older, he's an older man, but a great tzaddik. The kashali ma'in royal hara doesn't say, but he poses the question: why would a zaken who can't have kids not be able to pass it? Okay, says the Gemara. Let's say the expert of the basin is not there, no one. So why do we know that that's an issue as well? That the mufla of the basin must be present. Rav Sheshes v'chein so too was Tana Rabbi Shmuel. Why do they say the Horiot b'davar shasurim gemoyim b'paturin? Why is it that if the basin made a mistake on and made an erroneous psak on something which is preferred in the pasuk, because it's so obvious, it's a direct pasuk, so it's like a deliberate mistake, a deliberate sin that they made. They should obviously have known this. So lo hayim mufla shel Beis Din shamnami paturin. If there was no expert there, in other words, since he wasn't there, the other members should have stepped up to study the laws, and therefore, since he wasn't there and no one else stepped up, and therefore, for that reason, we're also going to say the same din potter. Okay, nemer sham. Eda v'nemer holon eda. Ashu kun royal harav. Hasamadon. How do you know over there? Demar Rav Chisda Makra. Yisiasvu sham imcha. Imcha b'dumulocha. Has to be someone who's like you. The emi imcha l'shchina, but not to go into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. El Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak Amar Kra. The pasuk says v'nasu idcha b'doimenloch. It has to be someone like you. Okay. Let's see. Is there a Rashi on this? Rashi says Shahi Ruin L'Hoira. Okay. Let's see one more Mishnah, then maybe we'll see a couple more questions. All right. Masnisen. Hara Beis Din Shaygin. So the Beis Din made a mistake when they paskened. It wasn't deliberate. We also call Kal Shaygin, and everyone's following the Beis Din's ruling. They were told Das Beis Din. They didn't know. They were B'Shaygin. That's what Mavian part, because that's like a regular case. However, let's say the Beis Din Mazidin. They on purpose lied and said this is the chaylev is allowed, even though they knew it was not allowed. They're also shaygin. So in that situation, mevin kispa usiira. It doesn't make any difference. Even if the majority of the people did this avera, it's considered to be has a din of a yachid, and therefore they bring either a kavas or a seira, just like any yachid, because since the Beis Din was mazid, so therefore there's no chiyuv to bring a par. However, let's say this the other way around. Also, shaygin, if the Beis Din was shaygig, which is the normal situation, but also mazidin, which means hari elu paturin, there's no par because they're not told by Beis Din, because since they knew means they were told by atzmai. Okay, they're patur from a par. Says the Gemara, shaygin, if the Beis Din was b'shaygig, we also mazidin, the people did it b'mezid, hari elu paturin, they're patur. Hashaygig dum b'mezid. Hashaygig dum b'mezid chayev. The hechadami shahar Beis Din. Let's say Beis Din made a mistake. Shechel of mutter. They're allowed to eat these non-kosher fats. Then ischalif boy b'shuman. They mistaken it with kosher fats. The achu, and then they ate. So lema tipsha hadaboy rama. Maybe that could answer our question we said before. They're relying on themselves. So it's mashma, they be chayiv in this case, as they aren't totally relying on Beis Din, rather relying on themselves. So you're chayiv, they'd be chayiv to bring their own carbon chata. So this actually answers the question that we had before, that are we being toyev das Beis Din or toyev ba'atzmai when the Beis Din said the wrong psak, but you made a mistake, you thought you were going to eat shuman, you ended up eating chaylev. So Amlucham Mishum the Tana Reisha Mazidin v'asu shaygin Tana Seifa shaygin v'asu mazidin. The whole point is it's just to flip the opposite script. In both cases, you're potter either way. Whether you were b'mazid, the people, or the basin was b'mazid, then in either situation, the din is that you are going to be potter from a par. But it doesn't mean that, it must mean that, again, in this case, you would you're toil b'atzmai, and therefore because of that you're not toil Beis Din, because the Beis Din made this erroneous psak, etc. Okay, all right, let's stop there. Let's see, maybe another question. Question 8, that was it. TA1, that was it. TB4, Shevet Echad Shasa Al Pi Horas Beis Din Hagadol Adkan.